I'm Sarah Burke, and this is episode 99 of the Women in Media podcast. Happy New Year. First episode of 2025. I've got a great guest for you. Before we dive in, I just wanted to mention that my guest today is based just outside of Los Angeles, an hour outside. And after checking if it was still okay to release this episode this week, she mentioned that if you're going to donate to an organization for wildfire relief, what she loves about Red Cross is they have therapists on site. And that's going to make a hell of a lot more sense once we get into today's episode. My guest today is Dr. Leslie Dobson, a clinical and forensic psychologist, an author, and a speaker who is about to launch a podcast called Intentionally Disturbing. Please welcome Leslie Dobson. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm ready to get to work. I want the year to start.
Yeah, I love how, by the way, we're recording this on literally the second day of January, so that makes two of us. You're joining me from your podcast studio. You've got a podcast coming that we'll be talking about. You're in California, right?
I am in Orange County. I left Los Angeles because it was just too much.
Was it getting scary?
So, yes, it was getting scary. The homelessness is out of control. And I came downstairs one morning and there was a homeless man trying to get in my door, which was next to my living room couch. And my 7-year-old daughter was sitting there watching TV.
That's enough.
And I sold the house.
I can see why. Now, when we were exchanging emails, you actually said, oh my gosh, I was born in Toronto. Are you Canadian who moved down to the States?
Yeah, so I have dual citizenship.
Okay.
I'm still not sure what it's called. I think we won the lottery, the National Citizenship Lottery.
Yeah.
And we all moved down here. My father started a very profitable business that runs coast to coast. It's a trucking company.
Oh, cool.
And then I wanted nothing to do with it. So I became a psychologist.
Was childhood all in one place or did you move around a bunch with your dad?
We moved a lot. So I have three sisters, and to establish the company, we were in California and Florida back and forth, in Canada. But then I also think because my father was not happy in his marriage, I think buying new houses was a good distraction for him. So I probably went to 8 different schools and we were shifted around quite a bit, but most of it I would say was in Orange County, California, which is why I have this vocal fry that everyone complains about.
Fair. So I have to give you a little background here. Normally I have some sort of relationship with a lot of the people I interview on this podcast, but I literally stumbled upon Dr. Leslie, I would say in the last month. I guess a lot of your content has certainly gone viral because you've been covering some pretty big cases in the news and things that not just Canadians are concerned with, but Americans and otherwise, including, the United Healthcare CEO case, the Diddy case. And yeah, I guess my first question is how do we go from being a clinical and forensic psychologist to becoming this content creator and media personality? Yeah. Where did the psychology start?
And 2 or 3 days ago, my TikTok was banned. So I'm trying to deal with that.
Yeah.
So I was working on the inside of prisons and jails. And I was working with psychopathic individuals and sex offenders. And that was my specialty, sex offenders. And there was just this one day where I had just found out I was pregnant. And this big psychopathic gang member, he said, meet me in the visiting room. And I said, okay, because I trusted him. We did favors for each other. Like I got him a new mattress, things like that. And he prevented people from killing me. So we met in the visiting room and he said, they know you're pregnant. They're taking bets on kicking your belly and killing your baby. And I said, how the fuck do they know? He said, they watch me. So they knew I was like going to IVF and fertility clinics and they were watching my bloat. They were everything. And that was the last day I stepped in there. And then after that, I started working for the VA with trauma, largely because of the student loan repayment in America. You work for the government for 10 years, they repay your loans. I owe $500,000.
Okay, VA, just for anyone who doesn't know.
Veterans Affairs.
Okay, thank you.
So all are amazing veterans, and I would be their therapist, basically. And also the really violent veterans, because of my background, I would work with them or I would train people on how to work with them because, of course, they're trained killers. So, but I actually left that job because I started getting hired by a lot of A-listers, a lot of celebrities, by their lawyers to do psychological assessments on them or the women accusing them of being raped.
Hmm.
And so my focus became solely assessing the validity of people's claims in civil litigation.
Wow. What an
And
interesting journey.
it's been quite a journey. So that's when the media stuff started, because I started to understand, hey, I can bring the secrets of the world to you. I can bring it with my vocal fry and my looks. And maybe it's like a car crash where you're going to keep listening and you won't look away and you'll learn something.
No, it's such a good way to put it. I can't look away from your content. Like one video, I was like, follow. When's the next one coming? Like,
Yeah. And so it's intentionally somewhat sensationalized. But it's also because I want people to listen. And I don't want you to have to see what I've seen. If I can teach a parent that they may be watching when you're not and just, be a little more aware, cool.
mm-hmm.
That's why I wanted to
Yeah.
get into media.
Well, and there was one video you had, I think it was like pinned to the top of your Instagram page that was like, oh, I don't do sleepovers and here's why, right? Like you actually just care about the well-being of how people are raising their children as well. And like
Yes.
things that you might never have thought of as a parent. So
Yes.
you only have one kid?
I have two. I have a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old who the
Okay.
8-year-old is sassy as fuck and I'm in trouble. Because
Wonder
she's
where
me.
she gets it. I was going to say. So now I'm also wondering, like, I mean, you left Canada pretty early, but
Mhm.
do you ever notice a difference between what you're seeing in like celebrity news or even just regular forensic cases and litigation? Is there a big difference in what you're seeing between Canada and the US?
I think there's a huge censorship.
Mm.
What I've noticed is that even my most mundane articles that I've published, Canadians can't open. And
Mm.
that is really quite surprising to me. And things that I post on these accounts on TikTok and Instagram, the Canadians had not heard of it or seen it. I think one of the biggest cases was Giselle Pellico in France, who was
Yeah.
mass raped.
Yeah.
She was under chemical submission. Her husband drugged her. And there was really no coverage of it in Canada. And me posting videos brought awareness to it. And then what I did was I put money behind the videos and I boosted them only to the countries that weren't covering the case.
Wow. So she's spending her own money to make sure that we know about all these important stuff. Thank you,
Yes.
first of all.
Australia and Canada.
Fuck.
Big ones.
Yeah. Well, okay. So we've just come out of 2024. I mean, there's a healthy conversation about how she should have been on the cover of Time magazine as Person of the Year.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we both agree with that.
Yeah.
But is that the standout case of the year for you?
I mean, it's definitely one of the most shocking cases of the year. It's shocking to me that their sentences were so short, and some got 2 years for doing it. It's shocking to me that 70,000 men were chatting about raping their wives.
Yeah.
It definitely stand out. I mean, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard was probably one of the most standout cases for me recently.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very curious about how Blake Lively and the Justin Baldoni case will play out, because I don't think we've never seen anything like that. But when it comes to criminality, I would say Wade Wilson and Luigi Mangione, and the way that people are responding to them has been the most shocking.
The Diddy case, I say that with like a huge sigh, because I guess because of how well known this person is, that's why, the headlines cover it every single day now, it seems. Talk to me about creating content around topics that are so heavy, so unbelievable, and just really hard to digest for the average person.
Well, they're not hard for me to digest. So if I can think of a way to share it with you in a way that also doesn't violate all of the social media standards and everything.
Yeah.
As well as vetting my sources, because I have a lot of celebrity friends, and I have people in Los Angeles who are are not celebrities, but worked for them or didn't make the cut. And people who really do understand PR strategies and the capacity of high-powered people. But then I also, on the other side, have all the lawyers I've worked with, and I've been there with the teams trying to take down celebrities, and they've lost or they've won, but kind of that insider information where I've had to sign non-disclosures.
Right.
So I do speak from a place of experience, even if sometimes I have to leave out the details.
Out of, your, we'll call it those connections or those cases that you've worked on, is there one that you can share with us that was pretty high profile that we might not even have known you were attached to? You're like, no, they're all in the vault.
I can say that men in politics to the level of the president have hushed a lot of women.
Oh, yeah. I mean, no one's shocked to hear that. Yeah.
No one's shocked to hear that.
Yeah.
I think what's more shocking is how many men lead with their penises and how it is just so common that they get power and money and they think they deserve to viciously rape women.
I mean, that is shocking. What's in common with, like, the Diddy case and all these other past cases too. It's abuse of power underneath it all. Now, talk to me about being a woman and entering this space. And please start with the psychology piece. Like, I would be scared, going into that line of work to begin with. Like, how did you end up working in the prisons?
My whole life, I knew that adults were lying. I was so sick of seeing adults lie and sweep this shit under the rug. And I would call them out and they wouldn't respect me because I was a kid.
Go to your room.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All the time. I don't have to explain it. No means no. I'm sorry. It doesn't. And from an early age, I wanted authenticity. I wanted transparency, and I wanted, to be taken seriously. And I knew I had to be educated to do that. And education was also very humbling because I understood that I was not staying in my lane at times when I should have. But it also gave me the ability to understand that the human mind and the psyche often doesn't have the capacity to be authentic or transparent or real. And I love working with clients in therapy and building that in them so that they can be their true selves.
And did you start just working with clients one-on-one before prison?
Yes.
Okay. Traditional private practice as well.
I mean, as traditional as what's behind me, they all know me and they know that they're sitting on that couch, and I try to get them to just not look behind them. Because as you can see, there's a functioning jail cell in the room.
Oh yeah. Duck over so we can see. Duck over.
Can you see it?
You have to check this out on YouTube.
Here, let me, if I can zoom over. It's a jail cell.
Okay. And tell me about that, please. This is your office?
This is my office, and there's blood splatter on the pink cabinets.
Real vibe.
I think it paints the picture of who I am, right? I like Botox. I like filler. I like to be a young Southern California woman, but I also have dealt with some of the most horrific crimes and cases I've ever heard of. I've never even seen them in the media. I doubt people know of them. And so the juxtaposition of me being able to carry the weight and the depth of a jail cell with my personality, I think that's where the podcast came from. Yeah. And when I pitched this podcast idea to iHeart, they loved it. And it's called Intentionally Disturbing, which I am.
Yeah. Well, the podcast and the content maybe, but no one sets out to be a monster.
Right. I mean, I have interviewed some people like in the cartel or in gangs who are groomed or raised, and that's the environment they are expected to shine in.
That's when the guise of intentional would come. Yeah. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. Disturbing to me is a higher order word, maybe. To me, it means these in-depth conversations that we don't get to have all the time. And so we have kind of sensationalized disturbing things like murder, being shot, rape, things like that. But also, I'm going to stop the guest in a moment of emotion, and we're going to sit in that. And then we're going to take it deeper than a typical podcast would. So it's not therapy, but we are going to go deep, and we're going to go deep quickly. And that is disturbing to a lot of people to hear.
I'm going to have some links in the show notes for how you can follow along with the podcast when it launches. It's coming out in March, at the end of March. And you'll be able to follow Leslie's socials as well. But maybe you can give us a little teaser. What's like one of the most disturbing sort of findings from one of those moments? Without giving too much away.
I interviewed a life coach, and the tables really got flipped onto me when he was trying to coach me, and I had to kind of flip them back onto him. But there was a moment where he paused talking about his father, and I held him to it. And I said, wait, what are you not telling me right now? And he kind of froze. And this is in a room with 3 cameramen, and, it's not an intimate setting. No. And he said, I just thought of something. And I said, tell me. And he said, my dad wasn't a good guy. And it just gave me chills, because his whole facial expression, everything changed, and he started crying. And so to me, it was like, that's therapy, but that's also this disturbingly intimate conversation we all tend to avoid.
I can think of so many men in my life who I'm like, yeah. And eventually kind of it fills up to the point where it has to overflow and come out, right?
Right. And if maybe we see someone else do it, maybe it gives us a little bit of permission to do it ourselves, to be a little more authentic, to try it with our spouse.
Yeah. You just brought up such an interesting thing of someone trying to flip the script on you. As a psychologist, like, it must be so hard being out in public and being like, oh, that's definitely this person going through that. And, oh, you have unresolved this. And how do you work through like not diagnosing everyone?
I do. I just don't say it out loud.
Yeah.
I have a few friends that I can go really deep with, and I have other friends that I know they don't want to be seen, and they want to be more shallow in our relationship, and I kind of let that be.
Yeah.
But I keep my circle very tight and small. That sounds very sexual.
No.
It is. I had C-sections, but
I get what you're saying. So back to the podcast, intentionally disturbing, coming out late March. And I'm just going to read this because I want to get it right. You're going to interview individuals, and there'll be people that have had disturbing experiences, but show resilience, right? So this is where you're looking to maybe see how they came out the other side and what they learned along the way. Is there, something in your own story that led you here?
I've definitely had some fucked up experiences in my life. I almost died when I was 25. I had a colostomy. It was sepsis. I had a bowel perforation. The love of my life broke up with me while I was in the hospital.
Fuck that, man.
It's okay.
He didn't cause it though, did he?
No, he was English and he got banned from America, so it's fine now. But
okay.
It was a time where I thought about ending my life, and it was the first time I'd ever experienced such darkness. And I had a plan, and I was going to do it. And I got myself out of it. I didn't do it, and I'm so grateful I didn't. But I've had moments in my life of dark emotions and experiences: divorced parents, broken family, loss of life. And I do find myself resilient. And if I can pull people up and out with me, or if I can shine a light on how they did it in their own way, I think that it is amazing for the world to see. Especially, I interviewed an amazing guy who was sexually assaulted for many, many years and then became a combat veteran. And it was a story he didn't want to share because he had to be tough.
Right.
And when he started sharing it, he actually became more tough.
Of course, yeah. Because we view those things as strength, but it's hard for the person in that situation too.
Yeah.
Hmm. Do you think, like, with the timing of the podcast, Diddy's trials in May, and we're kind of talking about a soft launch here at the end of March, and thank you for giving me the goods this early. I appreciate it. But do you think you're going to be able to bring in some personnel that are closer to the case than others would have access to?
Definitely.
Yeah.
My only hesitation would be is if I'm retained by either side.
Right.
So I won't be able to dig too deep if I
No,
actually am hired by them. But
yeah.
I think once a lot of A-listers and celebrities and high-ranking people see the podcast as an opportunity to show who they really are rather than what the media sees, it's a very attractive format for somebody who has had to live in an image their whole career.
Yeah, and the whole strategy piece that you sort of referenced earlier.
The strategy, the PR, the crisis management, the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni situation.
Yeah.
Everybody is commenting on them, right? I'm team Justin, I'm team Blake. Well, you've never met them. And what you have met is what their PR team handed you.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to call it like a prediction, but if you had to point anyone in the direction of truth based on what you know and your connections and sources, on that case specifically with Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, what's something that you would be digging into a little further?
I would be digging into her claims of sexual harassment further. I think both legal teams are doing a good job twisting information, cutting and pasting. These complaints are very messy. You can put anything in these complaints, right? None of this has been fully vetted. But once we pull actual records and there's a real discovery and a trial begins, I think we'll see that Blake has been victimized and again is a very powerful woman who did not want that to be who she was seen as. I do tend to believe her claims more than his based on what's been written.
Yeah.
And knowing just how women are treated in Hollywood.
I mean, I was going to go there next. Like, you're living in Cali. There's got to be just, I mean, I've experienced my own. This is why I don't work for a media conglomerate anymore and have my own podcast network. And just to set the record straight, nothing to do with like sexual stuff. Like, I mean, I just have been treated like I don't belong. I'm curious, what's been the come up in Cali?
Yeah. Well, I think what people don't know is how cutthroat women actually are in this industry. So, we've got cutthroat women who are breaking down other women, and then we've got the cutthroat men who are breaking down the women. And the men do want to run the industry, of course. And a lot of the marriages we see are not real. They're put together because of, again, image. So it's a rough place for women. I think especially women doing sex scenes. I just saw Baby Girl with Nicole Kidman, and I can't even fucking imagine doing the sex scenes that she did and putting her body out there for the world like that.
Yeah.
And how many people were in the room to watch when those scenes were filmed?
Yeah, it's hard to think about.
Yeah.
Tell me about a time that you stood up for yourself because of how you were being treated as a woman.
I think working in criminal settings. So when I was trying to run groups with mentally disordered offenders, so everyone had a mental illness, but everyone was in for a violent crime. And I walk in and they're all men. The majority of them are African-American males. And I walk in and try to command their presence, and they're laughing and snickering, and sure, some are snickering to themselves because they're schizophrenic, but a lot were just being assholes to me. And I would gather myself each time, and I would walk in and I would say, you will listen, you will participate, or you will leave and you will get a violation. I do remember one group where somebody who was extra defiant stood up and started saying, ooh, she got new shoes. Those are for us. Ooh, let's touch the shoes, and started approaching me. And I stood up so quickly with like a fighting stance. And I used what was beyond my mom voice. And I said, sit the fuck down. And I have never felt a surge like that come out of me. And I was like, you are not fucking with my body.
Yeah.
And he froze and he sat down and he was silent the rest of the day.
Thank you, sir. That's what we were looking for.
Yes.
Yeah.
I definitely do it more when my daughter is with me.
Show her. Yeah.
I've learned to honor myself over time, but having children made me realize that I wasn't honoring myself as much as I should. So I mean, I definitely, the other day, just driving in Los Angeles, she was in the back of the car with me and I had my gun. I wear my gun on my waist, and other places all over.
I've seen your gun on socials. Yeah.
And I have many guns, but one is like my favorite because it's small and you can't see it. And I'm driving near the federal building in Los Angeles, and this homeless guy comes up and he starts banging on my window and he's screaming at me and he starts banging harder. And I just got the gun out and I just showed it to him very kindly and he ran away.
Nice reminder yes. when it's needed. What's one of the things that one of your children have said to you that has worried you as a mom?
Oh gosh, there's a lot.
Sorry.
I mean, an 8-year-old, the things they say.
Or something you wanted to even correct about, you know, how they were looking at like a woman or you as a mom.
I mean, I think like my daughter in particular, I saw her the other day sucking her belly in front of the mirror. No. And pushing it out and sucking it in.
We both did that when we were younger. I can feel the thoughts. Yeah.
It made me really sad that that's already on her mind at 8 years old. But also, you know, yesterday she said, you know, why did that truck drive over all those people in New Orleans? Like, am I going to be safe when I'm older? How bad is it going to get? And so it's conversations like that too, where I struggle, but I don't want to scare her, but I'm authentic and I'm real with her. And I explain to her what terrorism is and I explain to her politics and that there may be safer places in the world that we will live one day.
Right. When it comes to safety, how do you handle that with your kids? Is there like, do you guys have, you know, sort of plans if anything goes wrong? And I feel like you have to where you live.
We do. Gavin de Becker, The Gift of Fear, is a great book for adults, but he also wrote a book, How to Protect the Gift, which is how to parent and protect your children. And so he talks, and I've done his courses many times on threat assessment, and he talks about things like, okay, tell your kids when you're in a restaurant, if there was a big boom, where would you go? Where would you run? And they would say out the front door, right? Well, you say no. Why would you go with the crowd? Right? That's probably where the harm is going to occur. You'd go to the back kitchen because you know there's always an exit in the back of the kitchen. So always teaching them situational awareness, not in fear, but in an empowering way.
Yeah.
Like with my daughter, teaching her that at school, it's okay to speak up. And if there is an incident, a shooting incident, just because the school taught you a certain way, and that's a lot of government control, you don't have to do it that way. There are other ways that you can protect yourself, like having, which is just sickening to say, but having a bulletproof backpack. And she's the only 8-year-old in her whole school who has a cell phone.
And you're like, yep, that's what I would like her to have.
Yeah, I don't care. Everything's disabled on it. It's a bark phone. Everything's disabled, but she can call or text me.
Just also on the personal front, how has your work impacted like relationships and intimacy? Because you've seen a lot of shit, first of all. Yeah, you almost have to like take care of yourself the same way you would some of your patients.
So my husband is a psychologist.
Oh, okay. That's excellent. Great news.
And he did forensic work with me for a long time, which is why we don't have the same name, because people would try and hurt him to get to me or opposite. But right now he is working with the veterans with inpatient veterans. So they've left the military and they're having psychiatric crisis and they're hospitalized, and he's working with them to get them through it. both of us are completely overstimulated and we come home to children. So we're very open about, I don't have the bandwidth. I'm at 10%. I need you to do this so that I can get up to 30% and I can be there for bedtime. And, we're very open about, this is the percentage I need for intimacy. Like, I'm not just going to put out after a really busy day. I need you to court me a bit, right? Like it might be a hotel room. It might be you buy me a massage, but I need to be able to come back to myself, be in touch with myself in order to be there for you in that intimate way. Mm-hmm. Because it is so overstimulating in my mind at work and then with young children.
Yeah. How do you cope when things do get tough? Like, I mean, relationship aside, like what are your self-care things for you?
Leaning on friends is huge, but I think Pilates has been huge, and not just Pilates, but really hard Pilates, Legree, where you're like hanging on for dear life.
Yeah.
So finding that surge has been wonderful. But I also really like talking to my daughter and, playing Barbies and just seeing the world through her eyes reminds me that I've seen so much and I can just live in her little world for a short time, and is so grounding.
Yeah.
And then I do yoga with her. We will both put our legs up on the wall and lay flat on our backs, and we'll tell each other jokes.
Yeah.
But coming back down to, you only need to be serious when you need to be serious.
Yeah. What about the social media element? Like, I mean, I used to be a radio broadcaster before doing all this podcast stuff. And I feel like I've lived a good chunk of my life, with a public figure sort of vibe. And, I still have to turn it off sometimes. Like I spent most of 2024 just being like, I don't want to do social media anymore. But I realize it's such an important part of business and everything. Yeah. I mean, especially with the peak that you're sort of at with, the podcast coming and all of that. How do you handle it?
I try not to live on social media. So I try to produce enough content, or I'm producing content every day, but I hand it over to a social media manager. She decides when it's uploaded with all the hashtags and everything. And so I have that divide from at least the pressure of getting it put up. So whenever I make it, it's done, it's out of my way, and I separate myself.
Can you send her
in
to
that
me,
way.
please?
Yeah. She's amazing. Good. But just trying to ground yourself is very difficult, because social media is such a huge part of our world and what we see. So trying to get off my phone, even if it's just moving towards television.
I know. This
TV shows. Now. I know. But I do have a hot tub and I love it. Sitting in the hot tub and just staring at the sky, planning ahead. I love anticipatory anxiety. So looking forward to things, but also big things, like I have huge goals for my career in media, and I only started social media a year ago and so much has happened.
No way.
Yeah. So I'm really excited. And so I remind myself of that, and that is, it really gets me going.
Yeah. So was there like one video that like launched you into this social sphere?
Everything started going really fast, but the shopping cart video was the main.
Oh, the shopping cart video. I watched that. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. You can see it.
I'm not returning my shopping cart, and you can judge me all you want. I'm not getting my groceries into my car, getting my children into the car, and then leaving them in the car to go return the cart. So if you're going to give me a dirty look, fuck off.
There were 100 million shares and 100,000 comments, and they were brutal. And I just was in my car and I was annoyed one day, and I just wanted to basically tell women that they don't need to worry about being judged if they don't want to put their shopping cart back, because their kids are in the car and they've already gotten their groceries in. And so I said it in a way that was provocative, and I ended with "fuck you." And it went crazy. And I had no idea that the shopping cart was such a huge thing for so many people. But what it led to were conversations about how unsafe it actually is to have your kids with you and return your cart, because pedophiles, predators, whoever, they've been watching you long before that moment takes place.
As we just learned from your story about prison and them knowing you were pregnant almost before you.
Yeah. So, what my hope was that people would see the rest of who I am in addition to that video and know that, it's starting a conversation about safety and awareness and trusting your intuition. The male response to it was horrible. I mean, men were just horrible. I can't tell you how many times I've been called a cunt. The death threats were significant enough where the FBI was involved in many of them.
Gosh.
And they're still watching many individuals.
Oh my goodness.
The doxing was significant. I had to, clean the internet and hire people to do it. It's a huge downfall with also going viral. But I was on every news channel, Court TV, Nancy Grace. I was everywhere. And then it led to ongoing relationships with all of these media individuals and production teams. And, I just filmed for HBO Very Scary People. And on February 2nd, I'll be their season finale.
Is there anything else that you would want people to know about you that we haven't seen on social media?
I'm pretty out there on social media.
Yeah, I mean, you are.
No, I mean, I think one goal I have is to engage in paid speaking engagements, to maybe do a retreat, and to start inviting people who follow my account and who I talk to through DMs to invite them to meet me in person. And I want to meet them too. Because I really have met absolutely incredible people through social media. And there is a downside, right, with the death threats and the hate and everything, but there's
of course
there's an upside to accessing incredible people I wouldn't be able to see otherwise.
Where do you think the speaking is going? Like, do you think it's in a, like, being more aware of your surroundings and education type of public speaking, or?
Yeah, I see both. Coaching and empowerment is a huge part. But also educating from a point of, I know what the other side looks like.
Yeah.
I think educating attorneys on how to use psychology and how to use their experts more appropriately would be a huge benefit to attorneys who come off as jack of all trades but master of none. And you can't be that way when you have somebody who's been raped. You really need to focus, and you might need someone to teach you. But I also, in that show Billions, the psychiatrist who was just there to boost people up to sell stock and buy stock, I think that's a fabulous role. Just to get somebody who's psychologically minded into a business or a corporation and get people out of their heads and bring the focus back to your job and your empowerment and how amazing and strong you are. That's what psychologists do, and coaches.
Well, I will say that, if there's one thing that stands out, sure, you're covering some things that many people are talking about, but you certainly do it in your own way. And I love it. I never would have known about you. I stumbled on a video. Like, that's how it always is, right?
It's so funny.
Very cool. And thanks for even being open to, like, come on the podcast. I just reached out through DM and you were like, yeah, totally. So
it's so fun for me because when I'm in trials, being in a trial is a lot of memorization, and you really have to have your head down. It's not fun. You can't even watch TV because it's going to throw you off what you've memorized for court the next day. So I'm in between trials right now, which means I can do media and make content and have fun and be loose. And then when my content kind of goes dark or I get darker, it's because I'm like involved in something.
Right. Well, we'll keep an eye on all of that. And I'm so excited for your podcast too. So all the best. Yeah. Congratulations. I'll give you an early congrats. And when it's out, I'll definitely share all your links. Do you have a spot right now where people can listen to a trailer or anything?
No.
Not yet. Okay.
Today we are finalizing the music intro.
This is a big step. This is kind of where it starts.
So my family owns an amp company. And so all the musicians are getting together, and it's going to be kind of a creepy, murderous Barbie themed song.
Okay. But no, I'm intrigued. And
I think if you tell a bunch of musicians that, they are there for that project.
They're like, ooh, let me work on that. So thank you so much. Oh, I've been forgetting to do this part at the end of the podcast. So before I forget, if you could give me the name of a woman in media, or a few women, if you want to name a couple, who you super admire, who live in the media space that you think would have a great story to tell here.
I think a fellow Canadian, her account is Mom Uncharted. I adore her. One thing I adore is that in America, TikTok pays you for your videos. And in Canada,
we're
it
just
doesn't.
broke. Yeah.
And so she is like straight up fighting the good fight and trying to get moms off the internet who are abusing their kids and showing their kids. And I think she and I really helped to get that account, Jacqueline and Wren, taken down. I received a cease and desist, that was fun. But I really think she's amazing. And then another woman, Annie Elise, who I think is absolutely amazing, true crime podcaster and a really good friend of mine. But she talks about such heavy things and stays neutral. And I think that's one thing I don't fucking do at all. I'm so judgmental. But
that's your brand. It's okay.
She has grace that it comes with true crime that I really, really adore as well. Yeah. Cool. And then, like I was telling you before we started today, Sharon Stone, who I get to interview, just texted me. And I think she's a remarkable woman. And she has some incredible films that have also messed with her life. And talking about the impact of showing your body when the whole world can see it, and you have a family and you have kids. So another incredible woman.
Yeah, Sharon will not be texting me, but you're going to get her on your podcast. I can see it. So yeah, all the best. All the links for Leslie's work, Dr. Leslie Dobson's work, will be in the show notes. And thank you so much for coming on the Women in Media podcast.
Thank you for having me, and happy 2025. We'll just pretend today is day one, not yesterday with all the attacks.
Yes, so much better.
Yeah.
So if that was episode 99, that means that episode 100 of the Women in Media podcast is next. That's crazy. I'm just letting that sink in. I think that warrants an Ask Me Anything question. If you want to write a question in, maybe you're wondering about some of the guests I've had in the past. Maybe you have a question about my broadcasting career, what it's like working with some of the other amazing podcasters on the Women in Media Network, how the network works. Hey, ask me anything. You can go to womeninmedia.ca, use the contact form there. You can go to womeninmedia.network. You can leave me a voice note there on the right-hand side of the page. You can send me a DM. I'm definitely going to put a couple social media posts up about this. And I also wanted to mention that on Wednesday, January 29th, I'm hosting the first Women in Media Network workshop of the year. Now, this is perfect for you. If you've been sitting on a podcast idea, you don't really know where to start. If you're wondering about gear and tech and where do you record and what is acceptable and is my idea even a good idea? I'm putting together a small intimate group so that we can work on this together. This is perfect for you if you already have a podcast too that you're just looking to level up. I've got a link to the workshop in the show notes, but if you have any questions, just let me know. Thank you so much for listening, and happy 2025. Thinking of everyone in LA, my heart is broken for you. And like Dr. Leslie said, if you're thinking about donating to Red Cross, they actually have therapists on site to support the people going through this tragedy. Okay, ask me anything, and I'll see you in a few weeks.